IndyCar and its various predecessors like CART and USAC has raced on some pretty bizarre and unexpected tracks over the decades. While it's best known for high-speed ovals and classic American natural terrain road courses, the series has made stops at some truly strange venues. Here are some of the weirdest tracks IndyCar has ever raced on. One of the first that comes to mind is one of the more recent street tracks IndyCar has tried out. From 2021 to 2023, the Music City Grand Prix was held in downtown Nashville alongside Nissan Stadium. The track's most notable feature was using both directions of the Korean War Veterans Memorial Bridge that runs over the Cumberland River. The races there for the first two seasons were chaotic caution fests, with drivers often unable to handle the two extremely tight sections around the stadium and on the other side of the river. In fact, Marcus Ericsson even won the inaugural race after jumping over another car and becoming airborne, losing his front wing. That sort of thing defined the Nashville street circuit. The track brought a big-time race to downtown Nashville, and attendance was generally good. However, the announcement of a new stadium for the Titans ended the Music City Grand Prix at this location, with the construction meaning a new layout had to be drawn up. In the end, the move was made to forgo holding the race in 2024, and the race date was moved to the Nashville Superspeedway, the oval that sits 25 miles outside of downtown Nashville. Perhaps one of IndyCar's most forgotten ovals is Saint-Air Superspeedway in Quebec. Despite the name, Saint-Air is not a superspeedway in the slightest, but rather a triangular 0.8 of a mile short track. From 1984 to 1986, it hosted the IndyCar series, but its biggest claim to fame is being the site of Rick Muir's horrendous accident in practice for the 1984 race, in which he suffered severe leg and foot injuries. A unique layout, an odd location, and forgettable racing meant it didn't stay on the schedule for very long. However, another weird oval replaced it on the schedule for 1987. Nazareth had long been the home of dirt track racing, but by the mid-1980s the business had dried up, and the big dirt track held its last race in 1983. It sat dormant for 3 years before the land was bought by Roger Penske. Penske paved over the dirt track, and Pennsylvania International Raceway was born. Soon renamed to Nazareth Speedway, it became a staple on the calendar with its D-shaped oval and odd start-finish line placement. The most notable thing about Nazareth was the significant elevation change during the lap, which is not usually too common on ovals. For the first two corners, the track points upwards, and then when you hit the backstretch, the track dips some 30 feet into turns 3 and 4. It was definitely a challenge in any type of car. It remained on the schedule between CART and the IRL until the end of 2004, in which new owners ISC, a division of NASCAR, shut the track down as part of the FERCO lawsuit that scrambled up the NASCAR schedule around that time. Since then, the track has been devoured by nature, and one of IndyCar's most iconic ovals sits decrepit in the Pennsylvania countryside. Switching back to street courses, I think one of the more notable ones during Champ Car's street circuit bonanza in the 2000s had to be San Jose. It was a very simple design, with a quick chicane before a turn 1 hairpin, and then a few more 90-degree corners. I mean, the track only had 7 corners in total. However, the streets themselves were extremely bumpy. This issue was compounded when the chicane launched cars into the air thanks to a light rail track running through it. It made for a pretty funny clip, as a stationary camera caught the entire field running over the tracks and flying into the air. The 2005 race took a beating on competitors, and attrition was high. The issue with the train tracks was resolved for 2006 and 2007, and attendance was generally decent. However, the planned 2008 race was going to be moved back to Laguna Seca before the merger with the IRL meant that the only Northern California race moving forward would be at Sonoma. We've talked about street circuits and ovals. How about airport tracks? Long ago, airport tracks were more common in all forms of racing, but by the end of the 20th century they had fallen out of favor. That is, with one notable exception. The Burke Lakefront Airport in Cleveland held IndyCar racing from 1982 to 2007. The weirdness of seeing race cars racing around runways subsided when you realized how good the racing was, and boy did Cleveland provide good racing in spades. It was one of the most looked forward to events on the calendar every year, and its demise coincided with the CART IRL merger, and despite many rumors, Burke Lakefront Airport has never returned to the IndyCar calendar. Another airport course was added in Champ Car in Edmonton for 2005, and this one actually stuck around into the post-merger era. The track did provide good racing as well, but it just never had the same aura that Cleveland did, and it fell off the schedule after 2012 thanks to promoters losing millions of dollars and underwhelming attendance. Another type of track that has been long forgotten is the roval. And no, I am not talking about infield road courses on big ovals like Charlotte that have co-opted the name roval. Roval was originally a word to describe ovals that race like road courses. I remember Darrell Waltrip calling Phoenix and Pocono rovals back in the early days of Fox's NASCAR coverage. Coincidentally, both tracks were IndyCar staples for years. Although you could put Nazareth into this category as well, one roval that was truly an oval road course crossover was the track in Rio that appeared on the CART schedule from 1996 to 2000. A D-shaped track, Rio had long straightaways leading into two flat, tight corners that necessitated quick downshifts and a road course-like approach. The most notable example of this was during the 1998 race, when Greg Moore drove around the outside of Alex Zanardi deep into the slow turn 1 to take the win. There's been other oddball tracks too. Some people don't remember that the Caesars Palace Grand Prix became a kart round after exiting the F1 schedule. Yes, it was still just as weird and lasted just as long as F1 did. It would not become a staple of IndyCar post F1 like Long Beach did. Another weird one was New Orleans Motorsports Park, which held one race in 2015. The track was a club circuit that attempted to put on a big time race. It rained the whole weekend, which turned the race into a big slop fest, and attendance was estimated to be a paltry 10,000. Disputes with the promoter meant that the race only lasted 1 year and never returned. Of course, with Arlington, Texas joining the calendar next year, you have to go back and think about other stadium tracks, like the late 1980s and early 1990s when CART raced around the Meadowlands in New Jersey to try to tap into the New York market. The track was uninspiring and attendance was poor. Another attempt was Houston around the Texans Stadium and Astrodome in the late 2000s and early 2010s. I actually enjoyed Houston a lot, it just didn't last very long, but it did have some interesting corners though. Let me know what you think are some of the weirdest tracks in IndyCar history. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.